Well, hello again. Thank you so much for joining me and talking about personality disorders. I appreciate you watching part one. This is part two. It's not going to take very long. Again, this is Pioneer Counseling. I'm Jurius Shaheen. You can find our website on pioneer-counseling.com. We're also on Facebook. Pioneer Counseling STL is where we are. If you ever feel like you'd like to schedule a session or for counseling therapy or even life coaching nationwide or globally, you can hop on there and book a session. So today we're talking about personality disorders. I have a few graphics up. We just covered in part one, cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. What the DSM-5, the diagnostic manual that we use in the mental health field, what those are categorized as for each cluster. So we're going to move over to a little bit more specific symptomology, of what these clusters actually look like. So with cluster A, we said paranoid, schizoid, and schizotypal are the three main um, diagnoses there. So for paranoid, we're looking at symptoms of suspicion, looking at hypersensitivity, and we're looking at symptoms of secretiveness. So someone being overly secretive in the going-ons of their life. So as we talked about in part one of this video series, is that these disorders aren't necessarily like other disorders where you may see a few symptoms and you can iron them out and work through them. These are personality disorders. They're a little bit more solid. They're a little bit more chronic in nature. They impact the entire personhood of daily life in various domains of their life, and to enough crossing a threshold enough to where it causes dysfunction, long-term kind of dysfunction. They can be manageable, can be managed, and that management might look different for different people. Some people might utilize medication, some people might not. Talk therapy is a big component to any diagnosis in general. So symptoms of paranoid, so suspicious behavior, hypersensitivity, and secretiveness. You can always open up the DSM-5, and I might do a third video going more in depth on the descriptive nature of these. For schizoid personality disorder, you're looking at a client that is seclusive, indifferent, and passive. The indifference here is a very crucial component of schizoid. So, indifference, meaning where one person or another might have an opinion on something and feel passionate about one thing or another, there's a level of passivity that causes indifference, and a person just doesn't really have a say one way or another. So, not just lacking of an opinion, but very indifferent about how they feel about way of life or values or um, even pain might be an avenue to look at. And they're very seclusive, almost to the point where they're kind of recluse. They're to themselves most of the time. And again, this isn't just kind of level one basic kind of symptomology, it's causing dysfunction in their life. The last piece of cluster A is schizotypal. In schizotypal, you're noticing an oddness in thinking, odd type of thinking, bizarre thinking, perhaps fantastical thinking, so existing in a fantasy world most often, or thinking in ways that are more abstract than your average person, and then using peculiar language. So language that is not seen as commonplace or that's easily understandable in everyday conversation. It's very peculiar, bizarre thinking, and odd thinking. With cluster B, this is where you'll find your histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic, borderline, and antisocial. With histrionic, which is most commonly found in women, they have a higher probability, higher percentage of that diagnosis in women than men. Uh, there are symptomology of attention seeking. There's a type of flamboyancy, and there's a provocative nature, a provocative essence to the person. So an individual might overthink or over describe or over translate what another person is saying to them as them maybe hitting on them or maybe them desiring them. And so they feel like it's kind of a self-centered experience. They're very much about themselves. So not necessarily in a negative notion or a large ego, but they feel like the center of attention is them. For narcissistic personality disorder, there's an excessive self-admiration. That is egocentric, and there is a sense of grandiosity. So a lot of times narcissistic personality disorders might behave a certain way, or there's a certain action that's exhibited, and they will justify that based on their ego, based on their sense of grandiosity. They may say, well, the reason I did this is because I needed to. It was the only way I could survive, or the only thing that I really understand how to do or how to live. And I had to do this because I'm an important being. I'm very important in the society, and that's why I had to do X, Y, and Z. So they'll use that to justify various things. For borderline personality disorder, individuals that have that diagnosis, they may be overly impulsive, self-mutilative, and perhaps even manipulative. They will manipulate certain things to have their life or their experience go a certain way or go how they want. Uh, Antisocial, again, that does not mean that they are not wanting to be around society, not wanting to be around others, but more so not wanting to comply to social contracts, to comply to social rules, regulations, laws. And so they tend to be rule breakers. They might tend even to be more aggressive than others, and they tend to have an abusive nature to them. So very abrasive, that kind of symptomology. Cluster C, our last cluster here, avoidant personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, and obsessive compulsive. With avoidant, an individual that has this disorder, they are fearful of criticism. They are overly serious, and they tend to be withdrawn. So not so much seclusive or reclusive like in schizoid, but withdrawn. They are not the life of the party. They are stepping out from the group. They're not wanting to be part of a certain type of group. And they're very overly fearful of criticism. So their serious nature and their criticism, again, we're talking about a level that crosses a threshold that makes them that makes a level of dysfunction where they can't function in a normative state like others. With dependent personality disorder, these individuals, they'll show a symptomology of being clingy. Now, again, these are very culturally oriented words that I'm using and descriptions. If you go into the DSM-5, it's got much more in-depth description. I might do a third video for that. So clingy, indecisive, and overly submissive. So they will want to be near someone. They will need to feel tended to. They cannot operate if they don't have validation. They can't quite make a decision on their own. With obsessive-compulsive disorder, these are symptoms that we find that tend to be perfectionism, passive aggressiveness, and rigidity. Things can only be a certain way in order to feel okay, to feel convenient, to feel comfort. Perfectionism in a sense that things must be placed in a certain order, things must exist or occur in a certain way, or else it's chaotic and I can't handle that. I can't function in a healthy way, in a normative way. So that's a little bit more in depth about personality disorders. Again, check out our website, pioneer-counseling.com, or on Facebook, Pioneer Counseling STL. My name is Jerry Shaheen. I'm an LPC out of Missouri. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you want more content like this, let me know and keep checking back for more videos and more information. Have a good one.